So we'll go ahead and get right into the demo this morning. I hope you can see that okay on the screen. As Bruce already alluded to, what the library really does is, as you're probably familiar with, all of our livestock mandatory reporting data, we get submissions from packers who slaughter over 125,000 head annually, and they submit that mandatory price reporting data to us. On a daily basis, we report base and net price transactions. We do weekly premium and discount reporting via that same vehicle of LMR. What this library really does is fit in between that base and net reporting, highlights further the premium and discount reporting, et cetera. So what a cattle producer could do with this is what I hope to demonstrate for you this morning is just become more informed. And by being more informed, maybe be more competitive, etc. So as you see, this is the landing page of the library itself. I'll try to run you through some details of this and not get too technical, but please, if you have questions at the end, happy to answer that. So the library itself covered any packing companies who harvest 5% or more of the nation's cattle, and we used a 5-year average to set that threshold. So what you're seeing here is submissions from the major packers in this country, major beef packers. In the first version of the library, we had 180 active contracts submitted to us. So there's 180 total contracts and 227 different base price options housed within those contracts. Why are those two numbers a little different? There's some options within the contracts. For example, as we get to the spec pages that you'll see coming up in the demonstration, if one component of the contract wasn't met, it would trigger to another option, and they would use that for base price determination, for example. So 180 total contracts, 227 base price options, and this gives you a nice readout. And pay special attention to these categories because you're going to see them appear throughout the library. What this is showing you is 75% of the base prices are sourced from a USDA report. So the LMR data I referred to earlier, it's very common to use, for example, a Kansas weighted average to set that base price before it goes through the premiums and discounts, if it does. The CME was the next largest category. That's your futures and options from the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Negotiated, top of markets. We'll go through that a little further in the demonstration. And as you see, as I flow through the slides, we're just going to continue to break down. This is your high-level look at where that base price is sourced from. And as we continue to talk this morning, you're going to see this continue to break down and filter down. So as we go to the next screen of our dashboard, this is from the front page. You'll still see the same metrics you saw there. And what we used is a form, if you will, to collect this information from the packers. So these are some yes/no questions that they answered in that form to get us to start filtering through that. Was there a base price adjustment applied, yes or no? 74% said no. So what does that mean for a producer? 25% of the cattle contracted had a base price adjustment to the base price itself. So they could take the Kansas average for the week and add $2 to it, for example. These cattle here, they did not have a base price adjustment. We'll continue to go through the columns here. Was a premium and discount applied? Over 90% of them had a premium discount applied. You're going to see that in much more detail when we get to the spec page. But that would be common in the cattle business. A smaller amount of them take something like a USDA average, add some money to that, and that's the net value. But the majority of them you're going to see do go through some sort of grid system, do go through some sort of premium and discount to get from that base price to that net value. The selling basis, What a producer would take from this, whether the cattle are picked up, freight paid by the producer, freight paid by the packer. There's some information that's helpful here. Some yield conversions, if they were live, what that yield conversion would be. Again, that's more just some detailed data. And then we start getting into the actual base price adjustment values. And again, the categories we looked at on that landing page are going to show up throughout the dashboard, as you see here. So the USDA reports, given that was the biggest category, we'll continue to talk about that. If the packer said no, we don't apply a premium or discount to the base price, you see an average base price adjustment of $1.90. So I'll just go back to the example I already gave you, plausibly taking a Kansas weighted average, for example, adding $2 to that. That's what you're seeing there if you're a producer. The group cut out to show, we saw no extremes in the library. We saw no premiums that were highly above for elevated for a base price adjustment, and that demonstrates this here. This is the lower 25% and the upper 75% of those base price adjustments. So again, just more detail for a producer. It correlates back to the screen prior. If you had premiums applied, you see a lesser adjustment to that value, and that's demonstrated on that line there. And we're talking a lot about USDA reports today because it really is the primary source by far of the base price values in cattle marketing. And this section here highlights that. I keep talking about the Kansas weekly average because 35% of the contracts use that for a base price value. They're taking a publicly available price report that our LMR team we receive the data twice a day. They verify the data to release, and that's such a trusted value that the packer and the producer are able to use that as the base price determination. So you'll see some of the more popular USDA reports that are used for that determination. And this really is a lot of information on one screen. As I said earlier, in our mandatory reporting data, we publish weekly premiums and discount every Monday. How does that differ with this? I'll remind you, our LMR data covers any packer harvesting over 125,000 head annually. This data is covering any company who harvests 5% or more annually. So you're going to have a difference there in the values in the data, but you'll see some similarities as well. As we talk about these contract specs, it's quite common to have a quality adjustment in a contract, in a grid. What is quality? Prime, choice. You are used to either shopping at your grocery store or going to your favorite steakhouse and seeing those USDA quality grades. So that's found very commonly in a contract. Quality, yield grades, weights, things of that nature, age, again, very, very common. We get down to a miscellaneous bucket, it's quite large right now. It's represented as a miscellaneous as 54% of the contracts. It's a pilot. It's something we stood up. We stood up quickly. We got really good. The packers were good to work with. We had good submission of the data. But this is the first version of the pilot. It will continue to expand. These categories will continue to. We'll be able to show more data within them. So while you're seeing such a large miscellaneous category right now, it's some uniqueness in the contract, some one-offs. For example, Mexican hided cattle being discounted. That's something that doesn't have a lot of commonality. We'll have to look at that in the weeks and months to come to see if more contracts contain that or or change and contain a discount like that, and then we'll be able to, the expectation would be the miscellaneous category would shrink, and it will expand those categories out over here. And then we get down into things like starter cattle, supply relationships. Again, the team, as the dashboard evolves, hopes to have some explanatory, either some hoverovers or some notes on some of these. Starter cattle, for example, that's cattle that are delivered very early in the morning. A lot of packing plants start their slaughter at 6 a.m. These are cattle getting delivered at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, to where you'd have a slight premium paid for those cattle to ensure you can start up those facilities every day. So there's certainly some fantastic details within these contract specs. And you see over on it expands on the right-hand side here to show that average premium or discount applied to determine that base price. Again, the whole library, what you're viewing is how do the packer and producer through those agreements get from a base price to the net price? The net price being the value that the producer get, the check they receive. So that's what this library is really showing you, is just that these metrics are occurring within the contract. A producer could plausibly take this new information, and if they weren't aware, I'm raising a high quality cattle, and maybe I want to look into some of these program type cattle. Maybe I want to look into NHTC cattle, branded cattle, things, more of those specialty type animals, and plausibly have the ability to at least have a conversation with the packer when they're contracting these cattle, and be obviously much more better informed. Our last screen in the library pilot today will ultimately house the volume information. As you see right now, it's just a placeholder. It's the same categories you saw on the landing page. We plan to expand those out and highlight the volumes that are running through those contract methods. For example, the CME, if they use a CME price, a futures price, to establish the base price, we would show the current month, the previous month, and we would like to show 2 months prior. So if we use the example today, the current month, we would be showing data for the month of February. That's the estimated cattle expected to run through these contracts a month looking forward, the estimates. This category would be the prior month that had just occurred, the month of January, and this would be the month of December. So this we'll chart that out. We'll keep those lines going. And again, this is all just the base model of the pilot. If possible, as we continue to learn more about the contracts, it's possible we could break some of these out. USDA reporting, for example, if you remember, that was a really large category, 75% of the contracts based off of USDA report. It's plausible in the future we will be able to break that out to possibly show a large report, for example, the Kansas weighted average, how many, but we still have to apply confidentiality to any information the same as our price series, so we have to make sure it passes confidentiality. We're not going to expose anybody's proprietary business data, but expect this to be populated, I believe, sometime in February or the near future.